Sometimes I invite guests onto the podcast or respond to people asking to be on the podcast because I think it'll be interesting and we'll learn something from them. There are other times, like today, when I just really want to meet the person in question, and I know for a fact they're going to bring new and positive energy with them and will truly engage them. So no pressure for our guest today. This is Empathy Unbound, Embrace Your Superpower, and today I'm very fortunate to be able to introduce Lina Jan to you all. Before any credentials, Lina considers herself a dreamer. Her ultimate dream is the same as most of ours, to make the world a better place. Whilst working as a ministry justice interpreter, she observed that many people who found themselves in some really bad situations shared one thing in common: the sense they had no power or control in and over their lives. Simultaneously, she observed that everything she felt called to do led her in the direction of humanities, from individual to collective well-being. She has since become a qualified psychologist, certified coach, and neurodynamic breathwork facilitator. Having combined all her experience, skills, interest in Buddhist and Stoic philosophies, and academic training, she founded a sustainable leadership training and coaching company, Redefine and Rewire. Her life and work's mission is to redefine the foundation on which the currently prevailing attitudes towards leadership and self-leadership rest. She's also a sworn believer in the ripple effect. Lina, welcome to our podcast, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Good morning, Andrew. Thank you.
We'll talk a little bit about your current life in a second, but I wanted to understand, first of all, probably a very hard question, who is Lina Jan? What helped create the person that's been kind enough to join us today?
Well, first, thank you for having me. As you know, as we exchanged a couple of emails arranging this, I was genuinely very much looking forward to it, because when I learned about your background, a little bit about what you do, I just knew that this conversation would be really interesting. So thank you for having me. To answer the question, what's made this person? I'm in two minds whether it's myself who made this person solely, or whether, no, it's not actually. So I'm not in two minds. I just took myself out of it. I suppose the choices that I made led to me being exposed to certain experiences. Just nothing out of ordinary, just your regular human experiences, really. The jobs I did, the books I read, and but one thing leads to another, of course. When you're exposed to something through the choice you made, you then learn something new when you're exposed to it, and then that continues to build onto the next choice you will make, which you will then again find yourself in a particular environment, or surrounded by particular people, or reading a particular book, or just come into a particular insights, because it's a cumulative effect, really. So I suppose that there's some of me that made myself the person that I am, but the world, of course, had a big role to play in it. So some of them, the choices, the first ones, probably they were rather unconscious, automatic, probably, just trying to survive, really. And then at some point, as you gather information about the world and yourself in that world, you start making some conscious choices. So that's a long and short of it.
And when you were growing up, would you say your family was a very curious family? Was curiosity something that was a focus?
My mum definitely was. My dad wasn't. My dad he was a alcoholic, and so everything it's my mum that I really owe everything to, because like when I was 7 or 8 years old, I remember I wanted a piano, and my dad was totally against it. He was all, like, this is nonsense, piano. That's not the what's the point, basically. Um, and my mum just really fought hard to get me one, and that's just one example of many. But she was very, very against all odds, against all forces, and she herself was very, very much a cycle breaker within her generation, within her family. Uh, and yes, I suppose she showed me how to do it.
It's amazing how often when I talk to people that the mom has got the biggest influence.
Mm.
Which I guess, think about nature, the first 9 months of your life before you're exposed to the fresh air, you were literally absorbing your mum's DNA and everything she's thinking, hearing, doing, behaving, and stuff. So that's imprinted on who we are, really.
Mm.
So no, I think that's it's a good answer. And how old were you when you moved from Lithuania to the UK?
20, just about 20.
Okay.
Just about 20.
What did you? Now let me rephrase that. Was life in the UK as you expected it to be? Was it very different than life in Lithuania?
Uh, no, to be honest. So life itself wasn't that very different. Although
Mhm.
it's hard, it's also quite hard to answer that, but I'll come to that in a moment. What was really curious when I first arrived, because I arrived in London at around 4 o'clock in the morning, uh, and it was early September, so it was still dark. Uh, and then got into Airbnb and slept until about midday and got up. And there's this glorious day. Glorious day. I think it was in Stratford. Was it in Stratford? Yeah, it was in Stratford. Glorious day, which went against anything I imagined. I absolutely, because as a teenager, I really loved Sherlock Holmes series.
Mhm. Yes, and me.
Absolutely loved it. So I genuinely imagined, uh, this sort of mist and fog and overcast and a lot more cobbled streets probably, and and of course I found all that later, as well as the narrow cobbled streets. But that first impression when I opened the curtains after waking up on the first morning in the UK was like, this is not what I expected. um, so that's the first encounter. But living in the UK, it wasn't. I can't say it was very different because my reasons for coming, they weren't. Because when I finished school in Lithuania, and I finished school just because of the different systems, because like A levels type of sixth form is kind of incorporate, you automatically move on to it
Yeah.
unless you opt out, rather than the other way around, which I think maybe it's the same in the UK now, but before it wasn't. It was a
Mm.
So I was 19 when I left school, and then I enrolled university. Uh, I didn't like what I chose. I quit after about 3 or 4 months, and I thought, okay, so I have to wait until the next academic year to enroll again, to re-enroll. And English is the only language that I speak, so I'll just go to UK and just see the world for 6 months, almost 20 years ago. So the life, because originally I didn't come here to build a life. I just came here to see the world and
Yeah.
just to experience. Um, it was just a fun thing to do. So I can't say I noticed personally. I didn't notice any difference in the way it felt. Um, yeah, and I suppose I came here, like I said, I wasn't fully an adult yet. Obviously, legally I was, but not in real terms.
When you said, I think on your website that your ambition, and I think it should be all of our ambitions really, is to make the world a better place or leave the world a better place than we found it. What does that actually mean to you?
To me, Right. So the very, very first thing, very, very first thing, I think it's the very first thing because I think it's an absolute foundation of its spreading is less suffering, considerably less human suffering. And when I suffering, I don't just mean wars, which are, of course, currently very at the forefront of everyone's minds. Um, a lot of silent suffering, a lot of uh, just suffering. That I want there to be less suffering, and I see so much of it, like you said in my intro. I think that's when I first became conscious of it. So I was an interpreter for about 11 or 12 years. And I think before I also observed it, but I was both probably too young to to put it together to make much sense of it. You just observe it on in an individual, and but then over the years, as I started as in interpreting, especially, I started seeing those patterns that people really the way they relate to the world. So they could be acting, for example, like really uh, well, cocky, but you can see, you absolutely know that it's a defense mechanism, that it's maybe it sounds patronizing that there's me sitting there knowing uh, what the other person feels, uh, but you observe it through the way it's react. And obviously, I was at the same time, I was already a psychology student, so all of these things started coming together, and you start seeing patterns, because we as humans, we share the fundamentals, the fundamental uh, humanity. And you recognize that in someone because you recognize that in yourself to a different degree, maybe. But still, we all have the capacity to feel uh, to feel the same things different times in our lives, some less, some more, but still. So you can recognize that, and I observed that the way they would relate to the world, the way they would feel wronged, be it by another person, be it by a situation, or by a system. And by no means I don't, because I have my issues with systemic factors myself, but that's, yeah. uh, they feel wronged, and you just see, you suffer when you feel wronged, and you might have been legitimately wronged, but I mean, for as much objectivity as there can be in that, but uh, they just you're suffering. So even if you don't realize sometimes that you're suffering, this anger, frustration, it's horrible, horrible, horrible thing to feel. And obviously from that, your actions follow, your relating to the world follows, which create yet more suffering for yourself and for those around you. uh, and there's so many blind spots that cause that suffering, and yeah, we are all susceptible to it, um, and some more than others, not through any inherent qualities, I don't think, just purely because they have not been exposed um, to the alternative ways of seeing and relating to the world. So that's the long and short of it. So yeah, that's the suffering part. That's how I want to make leave the world a better place.
And I think it sounds and is a very noble aspiration. It's something we should all aspire to do, is to try and ease the suffering in others. But I think it's quite difficult where you have, and you said you have people that are suffering in war, so that's quite visible. You have 600 million people around the world don't have access to clean water. That's quite visible. You have 3 billion people living in poverty. That's quite visible. But you don't necessarily recognize your next door neighbor is suffering because of the loss of their partner. You don't recognize that somebody is suffering because they are lonely, because they have depression, because whatever. So that's quite hard, that we don't listen enough to recognize when somebody is suffering. And I think that's one of the big things I've noticed in my during my lifetime is we seem to have lost the desire to listen properly. We have so many distractions, so many pieces of information flying at us through our smartphones, through the internet, through everything. We just always have more than one input coming in. So that ability to just sit and listen is hard, really. So I think if you don't listen to somebody, then because if you meet somebody, typically the English way of doing things is, or the UK way is, so, oh, how are you? I'm fine. And that's literally the answer. So unless you actually say, so are you actually interested in how I am? Because you're not going to say, how are you? Oh, I'm really suffering. You're not going to say that. You have to really listen to those verbal, non-verbal cues and really try and find out what is it that's happening. How can you use that? And as you said, to show that there is an alternative. And that's for people to recognize, to choose, to select, can they allow themselves to be helped so they're not suffering anymore? So it's really hard, but I do think it is ultimately down to the people that at that particular time aren't suffering to listen to others and just find out. Sometimes it's a really small thing, isn't it? We don't actually change the world to ease suffering. We can do it one person at a time. And that was I guess the next question was, sometimes, there's 8 billion people on the planet. Sometimes, whether it's political or environmental or societal, you sort of think, well, can I actually make a difference? Can I, Andrew, can you, Lina, can we actually make a difference? And I just wondered your thoughts on the power that one person has. What impact can one person have?
Huge, I would say. Absolutely huge. But before I expand on that, I absolutely agree with everything you said about, the listening, how we lost the ability to listen. And I think there's so much in there why we lost the ability, or partially lost the ability. And I think, like you said, there's a lot of distractions, and there's a lot of. But I think there's one thing to be said for systemic factors as well for me. So because we are very individualistic in the way we relate to the world here in a collective so-called West. But the systemic factors. So, for example, when I don't have time to listen, but I would love to listen, it's because I literally have no time. And that having no time is because I am busy trying to survive. Literally, because if we think about 50 years ago, there was one, for all the good and bad things 50 years ago that were around, one person working in the household could keep the household. Less or more luxury, there might not be luxuries, but you wouldn't have to worry about your, whether 2 months down the line you will have a roof above your head. Mostly, generally, of course. Whereas now you constantly live in the future, because in the present it's hard. It's hard for so many people, and even for people who potentially already secure financially and reputationally to continue being financially secure. Of course, they might perceive that they're not yet. If you have children, if you have grandchildren, you might you want to make sure that they, that you can support them if they need to. You want to be that. There's just so much. So, and the systemic factors that put us in that position as a default, and then you have to swim, and some swim better than others. It really, there literally can be no time just because you're trying in the broad terms to survive, whether your ways are misguided or not, or it's a different matter. But the point is, you are busy doing things to make sure that tomorrow is better than today or than yesterday was, for yourself and for those that you love. And there's a lot of people like that. So I think there are systemic factors as well in it. But there's another aspect, which I think that the reason why we sometimes don't know how to listen is because we or don't or are unwilling to listen, because we don't know how to respond. Because if someone says, when you say, "Hey, you okay?" No, actually, I'm really suffering. We've we've been taught that there needs to be solution for everything. In the since we were socialized from young children, in our culture, it's all about solution, and we feel inadequate if we can't offer the solution. And yeah, so we don't know how to respond to someone saying how it is, and that makes us feel potentially inadequate, awkward, because we were never actually told that just listening is okay. So yeah, just wanted to touch on those because I am very passionate about that particular topic, about listening, and both what impedes listening, and as well as we should be kind to ourselves for not being able to listen. To say be kind doesn't mean to not strive to put ourselves in a position where we could, or learn to, but at the same time, so we don't beat ourselves up for it when we have failed to listen, because we can't change that, but we can change it with the next encounter in the future. So yeah, just wanted to touch on that. And now I forgot what the question was that you asked.
Well, it was can one individual actually have an impact? Is there any point me doing something? Is that going to have an impact or not?
Yes, absolutely. Uh, I'll probably say it through examples. I find it easier to say it through examples. So, like you say, election just happened, a big thing. So, for example, in that context, one of the examples. So, say you're American and you chose not to vote because what's the point? And obviously that'd be quite a bit of anger aimed at you as well, thrown at you. But despite that, but if you so from that, so you as a person chose not to vote. You obviously you didn't vote because you think, what's the point? Nothing's going to change anyway. And then you continue uh, in that disempowered uh, way of being, existing, uh, and it really will affect the way you show up to the world if you choose. It could, I myself, I'd rather fight a futile fight, but because that's a lot to do with self-image as well, because obviously, as you can fight a fight that you're never going to see the end of, but if you do it, you do it right by yourself. You pick up that piece of litter there, so what that somebody else will go and throw it. You did it right by yourself, and that's so, and that will impact those around you. Someone will see you picking up that litter, or voting or not voting, or from the tiniest to the biggest of things, and someone might follow in your footsteps. those that won't, they will at least see that there's an option, you know, that there's an option to doing differently. Some might laugh at you, say, "Come on, what's the point? Why did you even bother picking that up?" It's well, that I've got nothing to do with those people that choose to litter again. That's my choice. I will feel better having picked that up and walked away. So obviously, for example, we set the example, and that ripples out. As well as if we don't live our life aligned as much as possible, given the systemic factors, aligned as much as possible with our values, just because, oh, what's the point? Our self-image will too suffer. And if our self-image suffers, the way we show up in the world will be very different to versus the way, if we do everything we can to align our actions, to align our way of showing up with our values, it will just be nicer people to be around, generally. Not because we are not nice otherwise to be around, but we will be nicer to be around. That again will have that ripple effect on people that you speak to throughout the day, or your family. That the way, if you feel good about yourself because you put all the efforts, you've done what you had to do, regardless of whether it's going to achieve the end that you would love to achieve. The way the conversation you will have at the dinner table will be different. The vibe will be different. The atmosphere will be different. The people you have in that dinner with, they will feel different, and it just ripples. So I think through the smallest of actions, we can, we can make sure that because it's exponential then. Whatever effect we have on those around us, the ripple, it's exponential, and it's up to us really what ripples from us.
I agree, and it was a question I asked, sort of knowing my own answer, and just wanted to validate it, I guess. Now, I guess two examples, one big and one small. So one would be in the UK. At the turn of the last century, women couldn't vote, so we had a movement called the suffragettes, and they started off very small, 2 people, and then 10 people, 20 people, 200 people, and eventually got women the vote. So that did start very, very small. It was something that the vast majority of the public were against. They were labelled as terrorists and lots of things things that seem extraordinary now, but that one person's view had a ripple effect and made change happen. Then the smaller ones. So my daughter's at a school, and the school used to be very strict, and it sounds very odd. They used to be very strict on the hairstyles that girls could have, and the amount of earrings and piercings and things they could have. And my daughter thought that my daughter has very strong opinions. Thought that isn't right. That's
I like
not
her.
that isn't impacting our ability to study. The fact I might have 3 earrings, 4 earrings, and a nose piercing, that's not making me any more or less able to study. And eventually, my daughter got other people involved, and they talked. They went to see the headmistress, and they got the rules changed. So girls can have purple hair and 10 earrings and 4 nose piercings, and it was in the national press, and it's bizarre. But yeah, so that thing about one person having an opinion and wanting to change something, I do totally agree with that. And I was going to ask, what is the ripple effect? But you've explained it as it starts slowly, 1 person, 2 people, and the more we hear about things, the more we recognize somebody doing something different, the more we say, well, they've done it, why can't we do it? And totally the same. So I was saying before we started, we have a lot of common land around here, and parks and greenery and things. And there's a little sort of cafe in the park, the nearest park, and they have sort of litter pickers. Those things you sort of squeeze and pick up in a black bag. And all they sort of say is, look, if you think you might be able to give 2 minutes just to go around and pick up some litter, and you go around, you pick up some litter for 2 minutes, and the kids think it's a game, and I love doing it when walking the dog, and it's amazing how much of an impact that has. And as you say, if people see that the place they're walking on doesn't have litter on it, they're much less likely to throw litter and make it littered. So that I totally agree on those you can make an impact on a very small level, or make an impact that has a very big result. So no, I do think one person can make a difference. Most things in history, we think about famous individuals
Mm.
as opposed to famous countries. Well, that individual did this, and she did that, and he did that, and that's totally agree. It's just having the time really, and having the desire, and having the confidence that okay, I'm going to do this. If something happens, it happens. If it doesn't happen, I've done it anyway, and then I at least can feel positive about myself.
Yeah, I've done
What
all I could.
Yeah.
Mm.
One of the things I should probably ask you at the beginning. It's a podcast about empathy.
Mm.
But what does empathy mean to you, and why do you think if you do think, why do you think it's important?
I think it is important. And my definition of, not definition, uh, the constituents of empathy that um, I put within the concept of empathy. Uh, Academically, it's probably wouldn't be agreed with. It would be two separate concepts. But for me, so obviously in your just regular everyday understanding of empathy is kind of one's ability to step into another's proverbial shoes.
Mhm.
Um, which I agree with that. That is what empathy is. But for me, it's somewhat broader than just that. I include in it, and I cannot see it as a separate um concept. Uh, I see it both as one. Uh, and I think actually that's even more important. And it's only recently as well that I recognize that uh, is acceptance when you are unable to relate. Uh, because I used to struggle a lot. I really, really, really struggled. And I used to be, and we all have that. We are to a lesser or bigger degree judgmental. We cannot help but make a judgment about something. Um, it's an emotional thing, and obviously several seconds later we can reflect on the judgment we made, and we can reason with ourselves and put that aside or resolve it or whatever. Um, but the fact that I used to be so much more judgmental, and I have been working on myself, and it's going to be work until the last day of me. But and it was because I couldn't relate. I would judge someone because I couldn't relate. Not because it took me a while to recognize that the reason why I feel judgmental of something is because I cannot relate to a particular experience or to a particular choice, uh, and so I since I've been in life situations. So again, I don't know whether it's the age thing or whether it's just uh, life experiences which not necessarily related to age, that when I've been exposed to sort of enough uh, experiences that a lot of us share. I know it's quite abstract, and but I'm getting there. That eventually I learned, so okay, I can relate to that now. I need to apologize to that and that friend for having judged her. Even though they didn't know I judged them, because I wouldn't voice it. You try to be supportive, and you don't voice it sometimes. Uh, but just because inside I judged her choices, uh, because I couldn't understand them. Um,
Mm.
I literally had to, when I finally got over that hurdle, uh, I had to go and apologize to a few people for having judged them. They were like, "You what? What are you even talking about?" because I never voiced that, or I never allowed them to see that the way I feel about. But yeah, so I think, and now I am a lot more, having been exposed to some of the experiences, and then be able to reflect, all right, so this is why they did what they did. Now I know because I experienced something similar or the same. And having been exposed to enough of that kind of, um, contradicting my previous convictions experience, uh, I'm now at the place where I can finally, okay, so I can't relate to you. I can't relate to, for example, to why you feel like that or why you think like that. I cannot understand your reasoning, but just accepting that, you know what, you absolutely have the right to have that opinion, or to feel that way. To feel that way, it's always valid, because feeling is a feeling. Um, and I don't need to understand to actually accept it and hold space for you, even without being able to fully understand or relate. So for me, that being able being able to accept without being able to relate or to comprehend sometimes, uh, on a personal level, accept that you can, can interact with that person, continue interacting, continue, uh, or continue even if you're not next to that person, if you don't know the person, on the bigger scale. Um, I think that is a big part of empathy. Like I said, many people probably wouldn't agree that would say that it's a separate matter, separate topic, separate concept from empathy. But for me, it isn't. For me, it falls within that same, because it's all about the way you then treat people, uh, or people's. Yeah.
Hmm. And I think that sometimes people make the mistake of thinking that empathy is about agreeing. And I think empathy is about understanding and accepting, and not necessarily about agreeing. You and I might not agree on everything, but I can understand your right to make a certain decision. And we've seen that a lot in the last week or so with the election, that you have one side that thinks the other side are idiots, and one side thinks the other side are idiots. So, but I can't be true. You're still the same next door neighbor, still the same husband, wife, or whatever, that decided one thing, and it is about, recognizing that, okay, well, that's your choice. I don't agree with it. I don't have the. It's not something I would have decided, but recognize somebody's right to have that, to make that choice. I think that's what I think. It's absolutely not about agreeing. It's about, recognizing and accepting. I think is where empathy is. So no, I totally agree, and I think it's really. I think the ability to accept and understand cannot be overstated in how important it is, really. So if we understood our close neighbours, our distant neighbours better, then the world would be it sounds very trite, but the world would be a better place, really.
Wow.
We have massive issue with the climate. It's the COP29 conference this week in Azerbaijan. It's an odd place to have it,
No,
but
no.
I think last time when it was in UAE, I think 85,000 people attended. It was sponsored by Coca-Cola. It's not necessarily a place where people come together to want to understand and to listen and to learn. It's changed a lot. So that's the danger if we don't have the ability to recognize or reflect on the experience of somebody that lives in the southern hemisphere, whose property's been, every year it's being washed away by the weather. It's difficult, and it's difficult where you have the countries that are most able to make the changes are the countries that tend to be the least affected by the impacts of the environment. So it's not a good thing. I do want to touch on, so you came to London to see the world, and you've stuck around, which is great for us. Thank you. But I just wonder what. So you've had a lot of experience in your life. You've had experience in Lithuania, which many of us haven't had. Experience of living, obviously, on the border with Russia. Experience of living in a family where we had a very strong mother and a father who was challenged. How did you take all of that and decide, right? So what I'm going to do is to help guide others on their journey to become I'm sure it's the right description, the best version of themselves or somebody they're comfortable with. How did you decide that that was your path in life?
I don't think I don't think it was an explicit decision to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think again, uh, however, well, depending on one's metaphysical position, the way I word it is that I just found myself having arrived at that. That's probably the best way I can put it, the way that I now find myself in the place where I am, and having embarked on the mission that I embarked on. Now, uh, explicitly having recognized that, right, this is actually what I want to be doing. Um, because for a long time, so like I said, I first I arrived in the UK because I enrolled in university, didn't like what I chose, quit that, and to be honest, for when I was still at school in the last couple of years, I was thinking I'd like to study psychology, uh, and it was still, so this was 20 years ago, and back then there was still a level of stigma in Lithuania around everything psychology, really, because your uh, standard uh, standard uh, opinion about what psychologist or understanding of what psychology is and what psychologist does is therapy, and because, oh, so you're going to therapy, so what's wrong with you, or what are you, are you crazy, or it was very, very much like there was still a lot of stigma around um, seeing a psychologist, for example, or a psychotherapist. So it wasn't, I was kind of probably talked out of it, to be honest, and just by the environment mostly. uh, and then I enrolled in something that was interesting, but it just wasn't. It was interesting because everything's interesting to me, which is sometimes causes me problems. But on balance, I wouldn't have it any other way. Um, but yeah, so I chose something other than what I wanted to do, and then obviously arrived in the UK for 6 months to begin with, and then stuck around because, well, why not? I'm enjoying it here. I can always go back the next year then and enroll. And then eventually I found myself when it stopped just being fun, and I was sort of, yeah, working. I was in a managerial position. You kind of have to start taking it seriously. And as I found myself, I literally observed myself uh, going dumber, if you will, uh, for want of a better word. Well, no, actually, that is my choice of word. Because I worked at the time. I worked at the airport, and so in the customer service kind of environment, in catering, in hospitality, and so the requirement even is obviously you make a small talk with the customer at the point of sale, and whilst you're making the coffee or whilst you're pulling the pint or something like that. And as you're at the airport, the small talk will always be, oh, so where are you going to? And people would tell me where they go, and I kept on finding myself thinking, which continent is that even on? and and I really didn't like that because geography back at school was one of my favorite subjects, and I could list every country, their population, their density, their capitals, and point them on the map. And that's just, that's 4 or 5 years later, I suddenly lost it all. So I observed myself getting dumber, and I thought, yes, that I'm not. Uh, I have to do something about it. I don't want to be getting dumber. Uh, and then I went and enrolled in a psychology degree, to do a psychology degree, because I didn't at that point. Because when I was enrolled, choosing what to study after school, I was thinking, right, the regular pressures, the regular how you do life, inverted commas, is, you finish school, you go to university, you start a career, you get a mortgage and things like that. And it's all very linear.
Yeah.
So obviously at the time when you're approaching the end of school, your understanding of the world is that the choice you make now will kind of decide the rest of your life. At that time, you still don't have the appreciation that, oh, actually, it's not necessarily so linear. And So when I enrolled, then having found myself getting dumber, enrolled into, to do a degree that I actually wanted to do, study psychology. I enrolled purely, my motivation was purely because I was curious. I wanted to study it. I did not think about the diploma. I did not think about, am I going to get work with it? It was just purely because I just wanted to. That's something that's been of interest to me for many, many years, and I gave into the pressure and didn't proceed when I could have, and then
Mm.
I was just naturally drawn to it. But the second time around, I just chose it because I'm just interested. I don't care what's gonna come of it. I'm just interested, curious. I want to know. I want to learn. Um, and I think then, yeah, just it just went from there. One thing I built on there, just exposure, like I said before, to while studying doing different jobs, meeting different people, seeing different lives, and it just all accumulated. Um, and for a very long time, I always said to myself, and actually a lot of my friends also say, how much can you study? Will you start doing something with it? But for a very long time, I didn't quite feel yet that I had anything to offer.
Mm.
Uh, I would always absorb because this is interesting, learn, learn, learn. With age, retain less and less, or have to repeat for more to retain. But I still felt that, I haven't, so I wasn't kind of collecting degrees and certificates here and there so I get to the point where I have something to offer. It was just literally one thing leading to another as you study, and you don't go down some rabbit hole that catches you, and then you start going into that direction, uh, and it just built on that until one day I just literally arrived at the place like, wow, I can actually, I know, the, that's what I want to do with that. That's what I want to do with that. That's what I want to do with that, and it all came together. Uh, and I literally found myself having arrived at the place I never even thought I would arrive at. Um, and I started, I just started seeing how I could apply uh, the accumulated knowledge and skills, which before I was really poor at bridging that, academic learning, or not necessarily academic, but any learning. I loved hoarding the knowledge, but and skills,
Mm.
but never quite had the confidence to apply. When I would be asked what you could do with it, I just wouldn't know what I could do with it. And I literally just one day have arrived where I could also say, I could almost say that I woke up and suddenly, yes, I had this, I recognize where, what is needed and where I fit in with everything that I got, and everything that I got kind of fell into place itself without much effort from me, just from the sheer volume of it, I think.
Yeah. And do you feel you're in the right place now? Sort
Yeah,
of.
absolutely. Absolutely. Again, I had never been so sure before. I would have never been able to probably say confidently yes, but I still don't know where I'm going to end up,
Mm.
which direction, not even which but I am absolutely, for the very first time in my life, I am now absolutely sure that this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, with the openness that within that area there's so many things that
Yeah.
but because before anything I embarked on, it was always temporary. It might have been a prolonged temporary, but it was
Hmm.
never fully me. There was always part of me that was not getting expressed, not being able to see the day of light, and that was really really difficult. As time would go on, it would become more and more different. Whereas now it's that feeling inside that, yeah, I don't know where I'm gonna end up, but I know I am where I need to be. Absolutely.
Yeah, and you sort of recognize that being comfortable where you are now and not necessarily knowing the final destination, but you can enjoy the journey along the way because you're moving from one place where you feel confident and secure to another place where you feel, and journeys take twists and turns. We all know that, but yeah, you've got something strong as a core, as a root, I guess. So I know this will vary a lot, but what do people find when they reach out to you? So it's obviously it's a brave decision to ask somebody for help in a professional sense and acknowledge that you need support. So how do you, and this is probably the wrong word, how do you diagnose what somebody needs from you and hopes to find in themselves?
Yeah, I wouldn't use the word diagnose, but I can see where you encounter difficulties because I don't know either. What um, first to acknowledge what you say. It's um, a very vulnerable feeling to approach someone. A lot has happened in the months or years and years in one's life to arrive at the place where um, where they can finally say, or have the capacity to say, um, yeah, I need support. And I say have the capacity rather than find themselves in whatever, because it is, as cliche as it sounds, vulnerability. It's such a strength. I cannot understand. I cannot state enough. It is such a strength because when you arrive at the junction, one junction or another junction, the third junction, the 10th junction, the T junction, where you can choose to either continue um, as you are, even though you recognize deep inside, because we can all recognize deep inside when something's not right. We might not know what that something is, but we will recognize that, and with time, before it's addressed, if it's addressed, hopefully it's addressed, but before it's addressed, that that feeling that it will come back more and more often, and
Hmm.
so the and when you arrive at that T junction, you can choose to continue as you are and ignore that niggle, uh, or you can choose to take that, what feels like showing your vulnerability, but to make that choice at that junction is the the hugest, the biggest thing you can do, really. Because to continue in the same way, again, I know it's very cliche, but it's cliche because it's true. um, to continue on the same path is much easier than to make a choice uh, that is different to the one you usually make. Uh, so to choose to choose to feel vulnerable, and I say to choose to feel vulnerable because uh, I absolutely would not agree. I would object and I would shout into the night. I would have if I had. So that it's not being vulnerable. Uh, you are choosing to allow yourself to feel vulnerable, and that is a strength to choose that, because again, we are. very much socialized as we grow up, and I choose the easier word to choose would be indoctrinated, but I don't like that
Yeah.
word. So I choose to say that as we grow up into and we are socialized into our societies, vulnerability is obviously it's terrible. It's a shameful thing. That's what we grow up knowing vulnerability to be, uh, which is of course it's neither here nor there. It's just horrendous. That's the messaging. But nevertheless, it's there. So to make that choice, uh, to feel vulnerable, not to be vulnerable, to feel vulnerable, uh, when you decide to approach someone, uh, because you find that you need support, is the biggest strength. It's such a huge step. So it is absolutely a strength. So to put it simply, vulnerability or felt vulnerability is a strength. You're permission yourself to feel that it's a strength. Um, and I think what people would find, to go back to the question, I hope that that is what people would find when they approach me, um, that they would find the space, uh, because I work, and not only work, just I live the I live on one of my foundational premises, uh, is that everyone absolutely has within themselves, um, what they need, uh, to what they're looking for, what they are looking for. They have it within themselves, and you can approach that from many different angles. This, again, another cliche statement. Um, but for example, if you so one of the many angles, uh, if you look up to someone, I don't know, you have your favorites, YouTuber, let's
Mm.
say, um, and obviously there's something about them that you like. So whether you like the fierceness, the ability to persevere in the face of adversity, or whether you admire the, I don't know, capacity to of critical thinking, of anything, just anything. You have someone you admire, and you admire particular qualities, and naturally you would want those qualities for yourself as well. Uh, just the fact that you are able to recognize those qualities in someone else, to even envy them, uh, that means that you have them within you, because you simply wouldn't be able to recognize that. You wouldn't It wouldn't resonate. It just wouldn't resonate. And I think we have all experienced the states of when we can't comprehend something, both in recent events and historical events. When you can't comprehend, how could someone um, do that, or choose that, or think that, or feel even. um, but if you recognize in something that you want, uh, that's because you already have it in you. You wouldn't recognize it otherwise. You simply would not. It would go over your head.
Mhm.
So I would like to think that people, when they approach me, that they actually find the first of all, a space, a safe space, a really safe space to just say uh, whatever, whatever is at the tip of the tongue, or whatever is in the depths of the essence. Uh, because that's you first need to talk all these things out. Sometimes they're just unrelated. You just need to talk all these things out
Mm.
until all starts to fall together, until you start seeing what's what. So first of all, space, and another is the that they find again their own, that they really, through that space, they actually experience that, actually, no, yes, I do have the power, I do have these things in me, and I know exactly what I need to do. So really, safe space, and a space conducive to rediscovering your own capacities and power and capabilities that you misguidedly, maybe along the way somewhere, assumed you don't have.
And when people come to see you, and I'm sure sometimes people share painful experiences with you. They share experiences of trauma, difficult parts of their life. How do you manage not to absorb that, and how do you manage to, because you can't forget what you've heard, how do you stop yourself carrying it around and becoming a burden to you?
That is actually, now we can talk about, because I remember one aspect of empathy that, just before I continue, I'll have a sip of water. So back to the question, empathy can also be, it needs to be balanced. There can't there can be too much empathy. There really can be, and I can share my own experience of too much empathy. Probably about 13, 14 years ago, I was at the airport, in Stansted Airport to be precise, waiting for a plane to go to Lithuania to go to uni, because I studied in Lithuania my first degree, my undergraduate degree in Lithuania whilst living here. So I was sitting waiting for everyone to board, thinking I'm gonna be the last one to get on. I'm in no rush, and whilst I'm sitting, I was scrolling on Facebook, I think. Yeah, it must have been on Facebook. And so as you scroll, obviously things fly through your vision. Uh, and I saw a headline. So it was one of the, I don't know, one of the newspapers' digital version. Can't remember which one. And the headline caught my attention, and I can't remember the exact headline, but basically the headline said something about a woman convicted and for animal cruelty uh, for having moved out and left her dog behind, or something like that. So I clicked on that. So it opened up, and I continued reading what happened there. And there was a warning as you scroll on the screen. Obviously, you scroll upwards, and there was a warning in the scroll. That there's graphic content coming up. So, and at that junction, I made a choice, and I explicitly in my head, I was reasoning with myself, come on, don't scroll, you know not to scroll. But I did. And the pictures that were there, they really, really, the degree to which they affected me, it was only pictures of the space. There wasn't pictures of actual dog, but of the space in which the dog was stuck. And it affected me to such degree. It just hit me. I absolutely could feel inside me, in my body, on a visceral level. I could feel the terror, the despair that the dog would have felt trying to escape, wasting away, starving over days and weeks, and it was horrendous. And even now, actually, it's still now that as I speak about it, it takes me back, not to such degree, but it really takes me back. And anyway, it really got me. It got to me so badly that for the next few days, so someone would be talking to me, or even if not talking, I'm reading something, or I was going to uni, I was going to lectures, or their lectures. It literally felt as if half my brain was engaging with my environment, and the other half of my brain was still in that space of terror of that. I just could not. It was literally as if there were two spaces coexisting at the same time. My ability to engage in with the presence um, and really, I can't remember how. It was an explicit decision, so it wasn't. It was an explicit decision that uh, I can't afford that. I can't afford to allow myself to be debilitated uh, by by stepping in somebody else's shoes to such degree.
Yeah.
And it was explicit decision, and like I said, I couldn't really pinpoint how I managed to put it into practice, but I think that experience was kind of something that really uh, again, I found myself at the point where no, yeah, I can't, because I had always been very empathetic, and sometimes, for worse or for better. Um, so there is a dark side to empathy. So we need to learn to protect ourselves, and that sounds very easy. It's very easy, much easier said than done. And the reason why it's much easier said than done is because you can't really explain it on the intellectual level, because it's a felt sense, uh,
Yeah.
and and obviously that's where the difficulty lies, because to know that you're now in a good place, you have to have the reference point for the felt sense, how it would feel. If you have never sensed it, never felt it, how would you know that you're in the way you need to be? But it's when you sense it, when you consciously practice it, when you consciously, so that, I suppose, that's the way in, to consciously distance yourself,
Mhm.
uh, because, and also the recognition of the fact that if you are affected, uh, you're no good to that person if you're affected.
Yeah.
So I think trying to put all those together, and recognizing that, yeah, sometimes you really just, you would want to throw your arms around someone, say, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," and that's it. But and sometimes that's what people need. That's not what I offer. But I mean, as a professional, as a friend, of course, as a but there are other ways to show sympathy and empathy, and then after the session, and it's a lot more helpful to them. It's a lot more helpful to those
Yeah.
people if you can remain in the balanced place. So it's a practice which you arrive, I suppose, with some sort of intellectual strategies, with reasoning and reminding yourself. But ultimately, it's a felt sense
Mm.
at which you have to arrive.
I think it's a very sensible reflection to recognize that if you're not in a good place or mentally and sort of spiritually, however you define it, then it's very hard for you to be able to offer the support the other person needs, or to be in a place where you can truly listen, really. And do you so in some instances you have to put up not barriers, but you have to sort of acknowledge feeling sensations and then move on from them. So do you find you're very open to being loved? Do you find it easier to love or to let yourself be loved?
Wow. uh, I think, yeah, I find it easier to love. Well, and well, having said that, I know, and I think, again, probably thanks to my mom, um, I somehow lucked out to really to to be in that secure place. the foundation, regardless of all the things that came with, like I mentioned, my dad being an alcoholic, and with all the visible uh, stresses and difficulties that it came with. I think it's just the way, yeah, my mom, she done something. She that's it's really my, yeah, my, I am safe in, if someone says they love me, I have no reason to doubt them. I sometimes find difficult, which probably many of us do, to accept the expressions of love, maybe. So, for example, someone just giving without actually expecting anything back, which is really odd, because when we give, 9 times out of 10, we give because we want to give, generally not expecting anything back.
Yeah.
And yet we struggle to accept that when it's given to us. And I think it's quite a common thing. And again, I don't know where that comes from. That possibly comes from, again, messaging outside, so reciprocation and things like that, which I am very much, I preach reciprocation myself. But I think we're sometimes misguided on how we perceive what reciprocation is. So it's almost, it's not an exchange of services or loving words, or it's not an exchange, because each I hopefully give my partner what he needs, and he doesn't give me the same what I give him. He gives me what I need.
Mm.
So that's kind of what reciprocation is, and it's so, yeah. But sometimes I think we still struggle to accept. Just yesterday, actually, I saw a video which made me laugh. I mean, on the face of it, it's made me laugh. If you go deeper, you can find all sorts of problems with it. But so there was someone's home, the door, like a door camera or something, recorded a woman cleaning shoveling snow off her driveway, and her husband comes out and he says, "What are you doing?" Uh, and she says, "Well, what you see, I'm shoveling snow." And he's like, "No, no, 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 no. I am here to do that. You go and go inside, get warm, get yourself a hot chocolate." And she's like, "Well, no, I can do it myself." And it's one of those. So you could, if you go deeper, you could say, "Oh, this is undermining women power, whatever." But all sorts of that. But it was or just accept this. So we are so individualistic, and we are taught that we have to basically fend for ourselves, and that at some point, it just it's we really have, it's a struggle to accept the expression, a particular act that stems from love. But love itself, yes, I think I'd love to think that I'm both safe in receiving it, and safe in giving it, without necessarily receiving the same back. It's just and it's, yeah, it's love. I think it's a very, very it's a very, if you're attached to it, then you're gonna struggle. um and I mean that applies not just to people, that applies to me, it applies to really every living thing. And I fancy myself an animist, um and yeah, it applies to every single thing. I have my favorite tree, which I my heart swells. That's the only way I can describe when I go and sit with it, or him or her, uh, and uh, and that's what I feel is just total love, complete. And uh, so yeah, it depends how we define love, or um, what we assume the application of that. It's But yeah, I think it's yeah, I think I myself quite safe in both receiving it and giving it without. It's an interesting topic.
It is, and I think some people, and this is maybe down to Hollywood really. There's this notion that we aren't complete without a partner or somebody to love or somebody that loves us. And I think, and it probably sounds quite selfish, but I think the most important thing is self love, really. And it sounds like a terrible magazine. If we can't love ourselves, how could somebody else love us? But I think what I sort of mean by it, and I'm trying to think of this as I'm saying it, so I wasn't planning to say this. I think it's we have to recognize that we are enough, and that other people come into our lives and offer different things, whether it's a partner and it's a physical intimacy and it's a mental intimacy, whether it's the favorite river we walk by and listen to, whether it's the tree, whether it's the birdsong in the garden, etc. All of which sort of add color and light and shade to our lives, but we're still enough without those things. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but
That makes perfect sense to me.
Okay,
Makes
good.
absolutely perfect sense to me. That's I think that's very well illustrated with the examples as well. That is absolutely and like you say, it could have come from Hollywood or from whatever magazines. And yeah, sounds a lot of things that sound cliches just because they've been repeated so much. But the reason why
Yeah,
they repeat it so much is because ultimately it's true.
yeah,
Whether it's something empirically tested or whether it's something that we know instinctually, uh, it's true, and it's something that. Um, but yeah, I absolutely agree that it, you it's very true. You cannot, if you don't love yourself, uh, the relationship uh, with whoever the relationship would be, a person, a pet, the world outside you. If you don't love yourself, there'll always be uh, something that there'll be a lack of, which you will continuously look to be filled by something outside of yourself.
yeah.
If you are to uh, if you are of the view that there is an outside of yourself, that's another topic. I'm sorry, I'm currently studying metaphysics at university as part of the current
Ah,
module, so this is very much at the forefront of my mind, different metaphysical positions.
I should have got my daughter to come onto the podcast.
I was going to
She's doing metaphysics. She's revising it for exams now. So.
you know what? I've been admiring her since you were saying. She just really sounds like a force from such a
You
young
sound quite
age.
you,
So
you're quite similar actually. I think
yes,
I'd be very proud if she
yes,
turned out as you have. But no, I agree, and I think there's that's one of the things I do think within society today that we have crept towards this expectation or need for external validation, whether that is the number of likes on our post, whether it's the number of friends we have on different social media platforms, whether it's that people's comments are things that we don't go away on a holiday. I don't sort of fly to Vilnius, look around and think, wow, this is beautiful. And if people haven't been, it is beautiful. Think, wow, this is wonderful. And that's my opinion. It's great. I post a picture of it, and the number of likes I get on that picture actually tells me if it's beautiful or not. which is ridiculous because I'm the person that's there. So I do think social media has done wonderful things, and it's lets people connect, and we can reach out to people from across the world always. But I do think it also, yeah, has done some harm as well, really. And I think it perpetuates extreme views of one way or another, and we end up, as you said, we end up in this sort of echo chamber of people that think and feel the same as we do. And I don't think that can be a good thing.
No, I agree. I'm gonna resort to, and I can't remember who said it. I love that quote, and I can never remember. It's a very famous wise person that everyone knows if I were to remember his or her name. But uh, ultimately, I don't want to butcher the actual citation, so I'm not going to try and say it, but said the words to the effect of that what determines if something is a poison or a cure is the dose.
Mm-hmm.
So it is really, in and of itself, social media, I think it's just neutral. It just is, and it's our relating to it that is the problem. And all the things you mentioned, which really then it really pushes us towards the need inside of us growing of the external validation. So, like you say, the picture. We post and then we check every 5 minutes or every hour, however, how many likes it has, how many what. It and it's not just on the personal level. It is I suppose some sort of human qualities that we have those tendencies,
Mm-hmm.
unless we explicitly and consciously put effort into balancing in the way that it works for us. um, but again, going back to uh, just so we are not too harsh on ourselves as well, because it's so easy to do. It's so easy to do to really be harsh on ourselves. And the worst, if we are harsh on ourselves in silence, that is the absolute worst, in my opinion. Recognize that, and there is, but again, I was just going to say there actually is now an acknowledgement that there's systemic, there's structures there, there's manipulation, deliberate manipulation, whether it's for the clicks and advertising revenue, whether it's for particular narrative that someone wants to spread. Um, there is all this infrastructure and all these algorithms and everything that they will, they want your clicks.
Yeah.
They want you to see the world in a, they have a narrative to push, or um, uh, and there are all these things. So we need to be kind to ourselves uh, when we start punishing ourselves, beating ourselves up for having scrolled for 2 hours. Because what's that yes, uh, there's some things that you are in control of, and we'll arrive at that in a minute. But the other things that the the whole concept of the thing is not exactly on your side. Not the concept, actually, the way it's run, what it is used for, is not on your side. So it is not exactly facilitating your finding the right relationship with it. So we just need to acknowledge that
Mm-hmm.
yes, there's things in my control, I can do something about it, but also I am not going to be beating myself up for struggling, because it, it's created that way to perpetuate the cycle for somebody else's ends. So it's important to acknowledge that. And then in terms, when it comes to what is within our control, that's when we can start looking for what works for us, how to get that balance right, because like you say, it's done a lot of good as well. It helps to connect people, all these movements that we have now. And I think actually all
Yeah.
this, the equality, the DEI and everything, it
Hmm.
wouldn't be as far advanced as it is now without internet and social media,
No.
because there would be little groups of isolated people, or worse yet, isolated individuals that would have not found the validation, would have not found the tribe for yeah. So it's done a lot of good, um, but yes, in that same breath, like you say, it disconnects us in a sense that because we surround ourselves with the echo chambers, we kind of, maybe there's even over validation at some point of our views, not of our beings, but of our views, of particular views, um, which we we fall out of habit as well to critically think within, so we can critically think maybe within the sphere that we are within, but we, to either critically think or to even listen, as we spoke before, to even listen to someone, we are even unwilling, because we kind of don't have to, we can shut people out, whereas before, in your physical environment, um, you have the people around you that you have with different views, with different ways of expressing themselves. So you, oh, is that your dog? Oh.
Yeah, I better just. I'll be 1 second. She's heard the postman, and she thinks the post's always for her.
Sometimes it
Normally,
is.
well, sometimes it is. Normally it's junk mail, but she did. I did once get a tax refund, which is quite rare, and she ate the check, so
Oh.
I had to get a reissue. Thankfully, I knew what it was, but it was my goodness. So yes, it was yeah, not good. Sorry. So back to social media.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's probably an endless topic, social media, but
Yeah.
uh, it's it's finding the right balance, and the way I mean, for each of ourselves, because it's only uh, the right balance for you will be different to the right balance for me, isn't it? And it's just, if it starts, and it's good to observe, it's good to regularly step away and observe, uh, right, is this affecting my life, or is
Hmm.
it still, am I still all right? If, and we all can have the criteria what affecting my life means, what criteria does it, or what thresholds does it have to meet, this, say, scrolling, for example,
Mm.
uh, for me to say, actually, yes, this is now affecting my life and I have to do something about it. The criteria for all of us will be different, the thresholds will be different, so it's very, very personal, to one's circumstances, and or circumstances at any given time.
Yeah.
But uh, yeah, we have to get into the habits, because it is still quite new technology,
Mm.
in
It is,
terms of evolution.
yeah, and we don't have the research to
Yeah.
know what the impact. There's a very interesting book called Anxious Generation by a guy called Jonathan Haidt, and he writes about his perception of the impact of social media on teenagers, children, etc. But I think until we've been through a few generations, we don't know what impact it has. I just know what, certainly when I was growing up, and I guess when you were sort of a teenager, it just wasn't a thing really, and it
No.
wasn't something that we had access to, or yeah, it was kind of exciting. One of the things I turned vegan about 11, 12 years ago, and I sometimes wonder how much harder it would have been without social media and being able to meet other, because I didn't know any of the vegans at all. I was like the only vegan that I knew, so actually knowing online there were other people that were also of the same tribe that I was, it did help a bit. So I do. I don't think you can paint it and say no, it's terrible or it's wonderful. It's sort of, it's how individuals use it, access it, and like you said, almost carry out that self audit of what is it that I'm getting from this? Is it more positive than negative? And those all those things. One of the things I did want to really ask you about, you seem to have your, well, not seem to have, you have the life that you want to have. I'm sure there are things you might want to change, but you have a role you want to do. You obviously have love in your life. You have friendships. You have friendships with non-human entities. You have a lot of good things going for you. But how do you practice self-care? How do you, apart from a moment that you have a cold and a cough and I'm making you talk, I feel quite bad, but how do you practice self-care? How do you look after yourself sort of mentally and physically and spiritually?
I since I actually found myself having arrived at the place to, I suppose, where I was always probably meant to arrive, and I then embraced it, which was a decision. It was when I arrived there. That's when. So I didn't decide to arrive at where I find myself now. I just found myself having arrived there. But then it was a decision. Right, what do I do with it? Do I embrace it, because that's required and continues to demand a lot of investment, particularly time, also financial investment, but especially time and headspace. And so I really, really, really am really happy to, for the first time in my life, to actually be in the place where, right, so when I have 5 or 6 hours sleep, and this is not healthy and I don't recommend it to anyone, uh, I have, I'm okay with it, because I absolutely love what I do. It, for the first time in my life. Before I wasn't okay with it. Before I was miserable. Some days more than others, some days less than others, but I ultimately, it was like a dead end. I was all right with what I was doing. I was paying my bills. I was going on my holidays, uh, but I did not feel alive, to put it simply. And now when I go to bed, be it at 10 o'clock in the evening or 2 o'clock in the morning, I cannot wait to wake up the next morning, because I want to get on with that massive list. And I want to get on with it, obviously, both to achieve a particular end point, in the long journey, because I don't know what the end point is. I don't think one is, but those little stepping stones. So, but I can't wait to get on with it. Not only because I need to get this done, but I generally, I love it. I enjoy it, and I don't know where it's gonna take me, that particular segment, uh, but I know that I will enjoy it. Uh, but that again was a decision. That was an explicit decision, uh, to be open to whatever comes, because it's very, very easy, and I've been there, absolutely been there. But I've been there when I was doing something that, I wasn't fully aligned with, where you kind of focus on the end. What's it gonna get me? What's it gonna give me? Am I at the end of it? Am I going to be able to afford to take a month off and go walk the Camino in Spain? Or am I going to be able to, pay for the next module in university? It was the end that mattered. So at that time, yes, I would have really. By that time, I probably didn't recognize yet that I needed the self care. Uh, Whereas now, when I feel finally having arrived at my element, uh, that process a lot of times is self care itself, because I could be reading a 30-page, and that's me. I'm a bit of a geek. Reading a 30-page, um, study protocol, clinical study protocol about how psilocybin works on a particular receptor in the brain, and I'll be reading it, and I'll be smiling because it's fascinating. So in terms of that, so sort of like a spiritual um, and psychological, emotional health, I'm just really lucky to have finally find myself in my element. So I suppose what I sometimes need to remember, as we spoke earlier, is that my body too needs a rest.
Yeah.
Because obviously, if I push it too far, you will end up affected both emotionally and psychologically as well, regardless of how good the place you're in. Uh, so in terms of a body, I really try to. I'm a breathwork facilitator. So the breathwork that I facilitate is that in itself is self care for me. Uh, but I also I do breath work facilitated by my peers with whom I trained some time
Hmm.
ago. Um, so that really helps my body as well to, because there is, with all the things I have to do, sometimes that tension in my shoulders that
Yeah.
accumulate. No intellectual strategy will help me. And I mean, I have plenty, I have loads, and I can reason with myself all I want, or I can do all the stretching that I want. That tension that's accumulated, that literally lifted my shoulders uh, to a higher position that they normally are, it just won't go. It just won't go because and the thing is, the funniest thing is that I do understand the physiological mechanisms exactly how it got there, and yet I keep on fooling myself that I can with intellectual strategies alone help it, which I know I can't, but old habits die hard. Uh, and so yes, I suppose breath work is not only the practice for me at the time when you're doing the breath work, because breath work is really also a spiritual practice that is an embodied
Mm.
spiritual practice, which really transcends the 2 hour session or an hour session that you take. It really is, because it brings you back to your body at the time. And once the formal session finished, you are a lot more in your body, and you're a lot more, the body mind connection, for want of a better uh, term. um, it's a lot, you're a lot more present, and
Yeah.
that is presence is a very much embodied process, which which is much easier to actually achieve. Meditation and things like that, I find it quite hard. I
Mm.
like it, but I find it quite hard, and it's quite time consuming. So I find it a lot harder to find presence through meditation than I find through some embodied practices such as breath work or movement, like med, movement medicine, some call it that, or like ecstatic dance, five rhythms, all
Mhm.
these things you can do. So for me, the breathe, any kind of embodied practice, uh, really, really brings me back to the presence to help my body and then mind. So
I like that. And I think I know the answer to this one already, but do you feel very connected to nature and the environment and the outdoors?
I do. Uh, I want more. I want to be able to spend more time there. But same as most of us, uh, currently, I keep on sitting on the sofa with a laptop on my lap, uh,
Yeah.
investing in the tomorrow that would
Hmm.
give me that luxury of more time. Uh, but yes, I absolutely love. I love this spring. I love the spring when I plant the seeds and put them in the windowsill, and you can see depending on the soil, but you can literally see when that seed, the very first time, the pushes through. You can see that tiny little grain of soil just roll off as that seed pushes through, and the feeling, I can't explain the feeling. It's something. It 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 to me, it's an absolute. just thinking about it, I can't. Yeah, it's beautiful. It is. And it's just another level as well when you're involved in it. When you're really involved in it, I love in the summer. I sometimes go because we have a stream or a river actually, not too far. A very nice, friendly, narrow, safe river that's quite shallow and but it's beautiful. It's got loads of rocks, so you have all the way the water runs. It's just beautiful. Um, so me and my partner, we go and sit in the tree and read. We have our favorite tree.
Oh,
It's quite climbable, so we sit and read just above the river, hanging. And at first it started as something, oh, that would be cool to do. Uh, but actually, it, as you continue doing it, you only really you start to appreciate. You walk, oh look, that this is the tree. That's the tree. Actually, it provides me with that space. It provides me with that breathing space, with that feeling of. I mean, you cannot not. Well, maybe people can. I can't not feel really grounded as I'm looking at this humongous tree that's been here for 100 years, 200 years, 300 years, and despite of everything we subject the environment to, it's here. And it's really, for me, it impersonates uh, the ultimate resilience, the ultimate wisdom of just being, and not resisting, not fighting back. It's not fighting back. It's just there. And that's, yeah. And it every time I stop to appreciate that, it helps me. I take a little bit of that for myself. uh I take it because it gives you that. You're not taking it from it, or from him, or from her, from the tree. You, it it's there. It says, come on, take it. Just take it. There's plenty here. And yeah, it's it yes, the rest of nature. I'm not gonna say nature, the rest of nature, because we too are so nature. And I've really struggled with that distinction that we seem to want to make between us and nature. um, yeah, it's so artificial and outright damaging, the distinction that we seem to, as a collective, seem to insist on. That it's well, to put it very simply and streetly, it does my head in.
I, 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 I truly believe that that the river you listen to knows you're listening to it, and I truly believe that the tree you sit in feels your hands when you're climbing it, feels the warmth of your skin when you're sitting back on it reading the book, and I think it's taking from you as well in the most positive way. So I think we are finally slowly starting to realize that everything is connected, and it's something that many indigenous populations have known for thousands of years, that the earth isn't something we take from. It's something we are the earth, and it's as simple as that, isn't it? Like you say, that the sort of distinction between us as people and animals and plants and nature. But we're all the same thing, really. We're all atoms, and we are all really connected. And I truly feel that nature is taking as much from your love of nature as you take from nature itself.
And you know
So I
what?
think that I truly believe that.
I truly believe that as well. And that reminded me when you say that, yeah, we are nature as well. I It might seem like a tangent, but my brain goes on tangents. But for me, a very that's the association that occurred to me as I was listening to you, um, talking about, like you say, we are all atoms, and we are all. I can't remember which year it was, but when Stephen Hawking died, I was never. I don't understand physics. It's just something I don't understand. I love chemistry. I love biology. Physics, I cannot get my head around it. As simple as that. Uh, However, so I was never, I never admired Stephen Hawking for his uh, for his genius in the intellectual terms, in those physics sort of science related intellectual ways. But and to be honest, until the day that he died, because I remember on that day I think I came back from work early, had a nap, woke up in the afternoon, picked up the phone, probably went on the same Facebook, and I saw the headline Stephen Hawking had died, and I didn't believe it. I can't, it can't be. It's a hoax. So went out of Facebook, went to Google Stephen Hawking, literally just his name, thinking I'm not gonna give any more clues to the algorithm as I have to. And as I type it again, it pops up that suggested that he had died at this and this age. And I was so I was gobsmacked. I could not get my head around it. How affected I suddenly. It hit me really hard. It really hit me hard, and I was like, "What the hell? What's all that about?" You were never a fan of his in terms of uh, what he did, because it wasn't my thing. I just knew about him. I knew he's a very, very, very intelligent person. A little bit of his life story. So you obviously admire someone. It was just that. That's all. Uh, and then I started sort of looking at why are you so affected by it? Why are you so affected by it? It really hit me hard. Uh, and I think because he died at the time, was it when the Trump was first? Was it just before the election? Sometime not long before. Can't remember the year, but it was around that time. And I remember the sense of doom because, as it turns out, upon reflection, I saw him as the voice, one of the voices of reason in the world. Uh, which I didn't read or listen too much of his, but for as little as I was exposed, he was just as like a safe
Yeah.
a safe voice of reason, that an influential safe voice of reason. Which, like I said, it's only upon reflection when I was wondering why the hell are you so affected by this? Come on. Anyway, to go back to what you were saying about the atoms and how we all the connection, how, because I was so affected, I just kept on reading and reading and reading about him, and I came across what at the time was said to be a eulogy written to Stephen Hawking by another physicist. Later, again, I learned that he possibly wasn't, but to be honest, it didn't matter then, and it doesn't matter now to me, because it was the eulogy that really helped me deal with it, and it helps me deal with any kind of grief I go through, uh, as well as it helps me put things in perspective, uh, as well as things in perspective what you said about the connection and interconnectedness, literally on a scientific basis. uh, uh, that So the eulogy, again, not to butcher it because I will never repeat it fully, but the words said to the effect of uh, that there is a fixed number of particles in the universe. So whilst there isn't a fully agreed yet what the number is, but it's agreed by all the physicists, by all the uh, what is known up to this point. It is agreed that there's a fixed number of particles. So, and a fixed number means that basically no new ones occur and no old ones disappear. So ultimately, what happens upon death is that we just lose shape. And so all those particles, those atoms, and that we are constituted of, they just disattached from one another and go on their merry way. And one will attach itself to a tree, another one will attach itself to some sort of mineral, which will end up into, I don't know, a, a spoon, a metallic spoon, but it's literally, yes. So we remain, we so we are made of the same particles that before was a part of something else, and when we go, we will again disperse eventually over time into particles that eventually will make up something else. So it is literally, and I choose to believe that, and I'm glad that so far it's not been, that paradigm had not been challenged sufficiently to say that it's invalid anymore, because it helps me, and it really helps me in sensing that connection, in just that little read of that eulogy supposedly written by another physicist to Stephen Hawking really helps me put things into perspective, and really helps me appreciate on the intellectual level, not the felt sense when I hug a tree, because I do, but also helps me on the intellectual level, because that I grew up in the environment that I can't help. My brain craves that uh, reasoning, that some sort of logic to fully accept a felt sense sometimes. So that really helps me uh, to really fully embrace that knowing that we are, because you can know that through feeling, uh, which that's exactly how I always knew that from very little, but obviously that was suppressed by all
Yeah.
the intellectual ways that we seem to embrace more than we do the feeling ways. So that explanation really helps me now, to really fully, wholly, there's a feeling and there's the intellectualizing bit that now, like, all right, this works. Yes, so we are all interconnected. Science says so. So, and feeling had always been saying so, but now there's something else to support. Yeah.
Yeah, I always thought it was quite cool that one of my atoms might have been from a dinosaur or from a leaf that was around at that time and stuff. And there's no reason to think not. It just, like I say, it's just the at this point in time the atoms have decided to come together to form me or form you, and we're all formed of different things. So within our atoms is the memory of those things as well. I think so. I'm sure science will come to a much more detailed understanding of all that as we go through in the next few generations. But for now, I think it's enough that we don't always need to understand everything intellectually. Feeling something is just as valid and just as powerful, I think. And having to sometimes trying to understand something always makes it less valid, because you can't understand a lot of the things that we sense or feel or experience. They're just what they are in that moment, and trying to understand that is a fool's errand, I think, sometimes.
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
I did want to ask, and you might not know this, but what do you think your future holds?
Yeah, I don't know. Something weird
It's
and
good.
wonderful. Something weird and wonderful. Hopefully, uh, really the dream, the personal dream that I dreamt since. Well, my mom said I first articulated it when I was 4, uh, and what I said then, apparently, that's when I grow up I will have a dog shelter or sanctuary. So since it's expanded, but the dream is, just to live in a bit of a middle of nowhere, um, self-sustainably, totally self-sustainably, and run what now has developed into any animal that needs a safe space, a sanctuary, not limited to dogs. So that's the personal. Uh, that's where I want. That's how I want to end my life here on Earth. Uh, yeah, I have. I need to. I must. And in terms of how I'm gonna get there, I suppose doing what I do now. It's simultaneously, I can't see myself, because before I actually found myself doing what I what I do now, uh, the the only thing that I wanted to get to was that dream, that middle of nowhere, self-sustainable life and animal sanctuary. Um, but I suppose somewhat subconsciously, all the choices I made to arrive at where I arrived uh, also created myself the life that would enable me to do that, in terms of the practical things like working remotely
Yeah.
and so the practical side of things. And it's just, I'm just really again happy to have arrived at where I arrived, because now it's just, now I enjoy the process of getting to that dream that was born when I was little. But now I love the process, and hopefully in loving that process in that space that I'm at, uh, I can spread the good stuff, help the good stuff ripple out from that very, very, yeah, because we talk, there's a lot of talk in big abstract terms about mental health, about that, about another, but it's also abstract, and it's also, it is those tiny little things, those tiny little things from which, where the ripple begins, where the ripple initiates. And so I'm hoping, yeah, I want to be in that space, because I know I've started to recognize, it took me a long time to recognize that I have something to offer, uh, until people actually told me. My friends would call me just to speak at me for a couple of
Yeah.
hours, and after that they would just say, well, thanks, that's much better. I just arrived at where I needed to arrive. And I'm like, yeah, all
Okay.
right, that's, yeah, with having said very little, just listen, just listen. Um, and and I still struggle to own it, uh, but I'm trying to as well, because I mean, I preach people owning their power, and they so I need to be I need to be working on that myself, and I am working on it, on owning it. Uh, but yeah, it's a progress. It will always be a process rather than a progress. It will always be a process. It that this is not something that has a destination. And yeah, so that's what the future holds for me. Working in the space I love, hopefully creating as positive a ripple from helping one person than another person, because yeah, that what they will ripple out will have a huge effect.
I think that's a perfect place to end. You've been incredibly generous with your time, wisdom, knowledge, and I absolutely know for certainty that you've got a lot more experiences to have and time and energy to give before your atoms disperse and form something else. So, no, thank you so, so much.
Thank you, and honestly, thank you for the conversation. It's uh yeah, it was a lovely space for me to talk about things I'm passionate about. So thank you.